I'm going to talk briefly about living trusts. Here's a little bit of information about myself and what I'm going to be doing. Basic fundamental information about a living trust. I get questions about the tax benefits, implications, are living trusts, what kind of trusts are the best for taxes, for estate planning. So this is just going to be a high-level overview for those of you who don't have a strong background yet in what trusts can do and what they're meant for. Some of the items we're going to talk about are what is a living trust, the benefits of a living trust, how to set up a living trust, components of a living trust, and the tax implications of a living trust. And then we shall conclude. Just some alternate names for a trust are, for a living trust, is going to be revocable because it can be revoked anytime for any reason before the person who set it up passes away or dies. It's also called inter vivos, which is Latin for among the living, because it's created while a person is still alive. Anytime in this presentation when I say the word trust, unless identified otherwise, I'm going to be referring to a living trust. Okay, so what is a living trust? A living trust is a legal document. A living trust essentially is just a legal document that controls the transfer of any property that you have placed into it. Okay, so it's a document that's going to control the transfer of property that you place into it. And it simplifies, it's a simple and efficient way to transfer property at death. That's exactly what a trust does. Now, this leads us into what are the benefits of a living trust. So the primary benefit of a living trust, or one of the primary benefits, is going to be that it avoids probate. But other than that, it essentially is going to do the same job as a will. What is probate? Probate is a process, a costly process typically, of allocating assets to the next of kin when the document, when there's only a will and not a trust in place. So what happens when there is a trust in place? The successor trustee, and we're going to talk about who that is, or what that is, the successor trustee can immediately transfer that property to the trust beneficiaries. That's what a trust enables the successor trustee to do, and that's how it allocates assets and transfers assets in an efficient way. Second benefit is anonymity. Anonymity is a will becomes a public record upon death. A trust document does not. Also, anonymity, when assets are placed into a trust, because it's not public record, potential litigants do not know what assets a person holds. So we know that wherever there's meat, that's where the vultures swarm to. So if a person slips and falls on a property, let's say you have a rental property, and they know that you have lots of assets, their attorneys are going to sue. You better believe that they're going to go after you a lot more quickly than they were going to go after somebody who doesn't have any assets, or they don't know what assets they have. So anonymity can be a huge benefit. Just keep in mind that a trust cannot be used to evade creditors. So if a person has assets in a trust, the courts will still enable a creditor to attach to those assets. Now, also, there's a part of anonymity is going to be a certification of trust. So a certification of trust is also called an abstract of trust, and it's a shortened version of your trust document. because you might not want to reveal, say, to a financial institution, you may not want to reveal the property being held by the trust or who the beneficiary is. So an abstract or the certification can prove the trust's existence without having to provide the entire trust. Some states, or most states, have laws that require specific information to be inside of the abstract. So you should check if you're providing providing the abstract to a financial institution, then check with that institution regarding what items and specific requirements there are for your state. That's anonymity. Who can't see them? And then the last benefit I'm going to discuss here is flexibility. So as far as flexibility goes, you can essentially transfer all or only some of your property into a living trust. There's a lot of flexibility with it. You can determine how you want it to be allocated. So it's really flexible. That's one of the major benefits that are touted about the living trust. Okay? Flexible. Whew. Now, we're going to talk briefly about how to set up a living trust. What are some of the ways that you could, if you're looking to set up a living trust yourself, or what are some ways that you can educate yourself further about setting up a living trust? So essentially, you could create your own living trust. Now, I wouldn't recommend just going out right now and doing it unless you know what it needs to include. There are a couple of resources here I want to share with you. One is a book called Make Your Own Living Trust that you could order. I believe it's $20. There's also a software that Quicken owns called Will Maker that you can also use to create a trust. And I believe all of the bells and whistles you can have for under $300 with that. So those are just a few resources for you. What you're going to need to do is, give me 1 second. You're going to need to sign in front of a notary, and you don't need witnesses. With a will, you need witnesses, but not with a trust. And you should list your assets in a way that the trustee and the beneficiaries are very clear about what is being referred to. And it's going to depend upon transferring the assets into the trust will depend upon whether there is a title or no title. If there's no title, you're going to use what's called a notice of assignment, which is just a document that lists the property that have been transferred to the trustee's name. So, for example, if I have a living trust, my name is Michael Wander. So the property without a title on the notice of assignment will say that property was transferred to Michael Wander as trustee for the Michael Wander Living Trust. That's if there's no title. Just a couple of cautionary points. Some localities impose transfer and recordation tax. Sometimes forms may need to be completed when assets are transferred. For example, in California, there's a preliminary change of ownership form that's required for real estate, but there's no fees on that form. So just keep in mind that there might be some locality and state requirements when transferring assets. Okay, moving along. Components of a living trust. We've spoken about them briefly. What are some of the components of a living trust? The trustee. You must identify who the trustee is, and they are going to manage the trust property. Initially, that's going to be you. Then you have the successor trustee. After death, the successor trustee will take over. Then property. What is the property? These are components of a trust document that should be included on the trust document. So what are the property that is going to be subject to the trust? who is the beneficiary, or who are the beneficiaries of the trust that are going to receive your property at your death, and then any other terms of the trust. And this should include that you can amend or revoke the trust at any time. Okay, now we're going to move on to what are the tax benefits or the tax implications of a living trust. So there is actually no tax difference between a living trust and not having a living trust, contrary to what some people might think or say. It's exactly the same when you have a standard living trust. There are going to be some different types of trust, tax savings trusts, which I will mention in the next slide. But as far as the standard living trust, they're not functionally distinct from you as an individual. If you have your primary residence in the living trust, you can still deduct mortgage interest on your Schedule A, and you will still qualify for the exclusion, $250,000 to $500,000 exclusion when you sell the property once every 2 years. Now, for a potential tax strategy for estate taxes, you could give away property while you are still alive, and we're not going to go into those details in this presentation. Or as I mentioned, there might be an estate tax saving trust, which we'll discuss briefly. I'll mention briefly on the next slide. So just remember, typically there's not going to be any tax advantage in setting up a living trust. Okay. Now, conclusion. In conclusion, there are other types of trusts that you could be looking at, and I may make it in a different video. There's going to be something called an ongoing trust, an AB disclaimer trust, and then some estate tax saving trusts might be or could be the marital trust, the generation skipping trust, an irrevocable life insurance trust, and a grantor retained interest trust. So those are some other trusts that would create or would likely create some estate tax savings, which we'll probably we will keep for a different show, different presentation. Now that is basically it. All right, those are the other types of trusts I mentioned. That's me right there, Better Hair Day. That's how you can contact us if you want. If you have any questions about living trusts or the tax implications of them or anything else that you would like to contact us about, you can do so right there. Have a great day.